See? Errol made it look easy, and he's lying. It's not easy. So here I am, the moderator. So we do have an amazing panel, and these represent communities of makers. They have made huge steps towards transforming their schools, their districts, their cities. So we're going to talk as much as possible in 45 minutes and ask questions and answer questions around how that works and how we all can build our communities out. So we're going to start with, sorry, I need my glasses. See, that's the other thing. Errol has 20 years on me. So we're going to start with Mark, and we're each going to give us a 3-minute introduction to themselves and a little bit of what they do.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Erlenwine. I'm the principal at Staten Island Technical High School. I'm starting my 4th year as principal at Staten Island Tech. I've been there for 19 years, and a little bit before that, I actually graduated from Staten Island Tech somewhere in the early 90s. I started as a science and technology teacher, and as long as I was working there as a part of the faculty, we were our first robotics school, and over the past 19 or so years, became very successful endeavors in FIRST Robotics, especially the FRC program. And it seems somewhere along the way, as being a STEM school, we're a college career preparatory institution, but we really focus on STEM. And along the way in the STEM nomenclature, we used that word in the last panel, so I'll use it again, this word maker started to show up. And along the way with our success and this new terminology emerging, makerspace, what we realized what we really had instead of just having a robotics workshop was a makerspace. And I'm really looking forward today to share some of the stories and experiences of how what we realized what we really had was a makerspace and how we've begun to transform this into creating a K through 12, I like to call it a K through 16 pipeline in our school community. District 31 in Staten Island, where we're trying to cultivate a visit program. We've been doing this for 4 years and expanding upon that with the makerspace. We've been bringing in the elementary and the middle schools into our building, and now we're looking forward to transforming this whole process into using the makerspace as a staging area, not just for our school, but for the community, and hopefully to build upon the district-wide efforts in replicating that in the other schools.
Excellent, thank you. So the other thing I should have learned from Errol is to put the speakers in the right order. So we're going to go with you next. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Ralston, and I'm the superintendent in Avonworth School District. We're located just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're a small public school, about 1,700 students, K-12. And it's my pleasure to be with you here and talk about our maker community. But I will say that all of the work that we've done with Maker Education really has been powered by a couple of organizations. One is Remake Learning, and Ann is going to tell you more about Remake Learning. But it's really where the genesis of all this came from. And specifically, it's our partnership with the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And they have just been a wonderful partner for us to facilitate Maker Education by giving our teachers a good sense of how it works within their classrooms through professional development. And am I supposed to advance this actually on here? Or is it? Oh, okay, yeah. So I have a couple slides actually just to give a sense of some of the things that I think make us a strong maker community as an exemplar. And it's not only the pieces of how we embed it within our curriculum. You see the picture on the right-hand side. That's an example of a program called the Pittsburgh Galleries Project in our high school, where high school students can partner with all the different museums in Pittsburgh. So the Carnegie Museum of Art, the Warhol Museum, the Mattress Factory, and several others. Right here you see someone working with the Glass Center of Pittsburgh. And so they spend time down at sites of the museums, and they learn all different aspects about art. The business side, how you curate, how you create, and then they take those ideas back up on campus and they use those ideas to then transform the physical environment of the school. So for example, one of our hallways in our high school is the Warhol hallway, and it's painted in very Warhol-esque style, and the kids did all that, and it's something that they have powered themselves. We've also, expanded things to maker nights with our kids. Our kids leading those, not simply adults facilitating maker activities, but our kids leading maker activities for the adults. So kind of flipping it. And then Saturday events and we've made it intergenerational. So we have grandparents that come in and are teaching quilting and different things that some of the kids may. That's sort of a lost art. So really kind of a cool thing. We took a big step this year in terms of saying how much do we really value making and how can we continue to scale it in the district. So we actually took one of our kindergarten teachers who was a leader in the district and a leader in the region in making, and we partnered with the Children's Museum and we created a Maker Education Specialist position. So she works in our district part-time and she works with our teachers to expand maker activities in the classroom. And she also works down at the Children's Museum, and through that placement, she's able to work with teachers and some of the maker artists in the museum to give them a better sense of how it can be more effective within the classrooms when they work with students and down at the museum. Student agency, I think, is a big part of it as well. We tried, as you heard through many others, there's been exemplars all day long today, about how can you give students voice and choice. And so we do that a lot of that as well. And then the other picture on there, parent support group, we actually have trained a lot of our parents through a maker boot camp that our Children's Museum offers. And so they're able to support maker education in our schools by volunteering in our maker spaces, which is kind of a cool thing, and it actually provides more emphasis for our teachers to know that they're going to have support when they want to bring their classroom down to the maker space. And lastly, I've just mentioned that it's been a great way for us to connect our community. There's some examples here and some pictures showing that really it's for all levels. And you heard this message earlier. It's not just for elementary, it's for secondary as well. It's provided us access to all of our students. And, we honestly, through the last picture there, we transformed an outside space. It became a community-wide event where we were engaging landscape architects to come and work with our kids. And it really was a special opportunity for everyone in the district. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ann Sekula, and I'm with I wish I was with Avonworth. I've thought about moving there, and I'm going to see if Tom, how long he's going to be the superintendent.
I'm threatened now that you've become the superintendent, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Should I start looking for another job now?
We can trade. You want to trade? But I'm Ann Sekula. I'm the director of the Remake Learning Council. It's a regional council in the Pittsburgh region, which actually swoops down into West Virginia. About five county region, and that is really looking and connecting around creating engaging and relevant learning opportunities for children in and out of schools. And how do we advance this? Okay, there we go. And so it's a professional network, and really what my job is to be a connector, and what Remake Learning does is connect educators and innovators across the region who really want to work together and work on collaborative projects to transform learning for the region's children. It was founded in 2007, so we're about almost 10 years old, and it was really started informally, informal networks of people bumping up against each other and over coffee, to something that's formalized a bit more over the past 6 years. And really just with the premise of promoting collaborations and partnerships. And now we have probably 250 organizational members, over 3,000 individuals who follow and are part of what we consider our network. And it's one of those things, when you're a part of the network, what's that mean? Well, there were two young men that got on the plane this morning coming up here, and the co-pilot announced, oh, these young men are from Pittsburgh, and they are going up to the World Maker Faire with their Lego robots to present. And a couple years from now, they're going to be the ones working for Uber here in Pittsburgh, creating our drone autonomous vehicles. And I thought, I'm going to go find them, and they've got to be part of the network. And that's how we really feel, and of really trying to reach out and engage great thinkers and creators. And so to kind of talk about really how we've done this as a region, and how we've created this community goes back to, as Tom talks about, sort of there's a network, but there's also anchor institutions and anchor partners that we consider the exemplars for our region and those that we want to scale the great work that they do. So part of the network, I think probably in the early stages of the network, the CEO of the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, Jane Werner, through some of our networking events, bumped up against some professors in the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon, a game-based entrepreneur, a large business actually, not really an entrepreneur anymore, CEO, and learning scientist from the University of Pittsburgh. And I think they were talking about the makers movement and said, how do we create a space like this for children where they can really have the access to the materials and ideas that they can create anything that they want to create, and thus launched the Make Shop at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh in 2011. Also in 2011, the Mini Maker Fair came. And then we continued to see the work, the Children's Museum, and it was really interesting to look at this because I feel like we've been hit by a tidal wave with everything that's been going on, but this was just in 2011, it wasn't that long ago. The Children's Museum has done seminal research for IMLS on the framework of what are the principles and practices in making. They've connected through these maker fellowships with Avonworth School District, with many other school districts to help stand up maker spaces in schools. They provided boot camps and professional development for educators. Last year, they launched a Kickstarter campaign to equip maker spaces, really a pilot in Pittsburgh, to the Pittsburgh region, to look at what would it take for schools to fundraise through Kickstarter to create quality maker spaces, and which is launched into the Maker Ed and Google initiative Making Spaces this year. So just this tremendous amount of work that they continue to be a partner and a key central hub for this for the region. But alongside of that is the network that is there to convene all of the others that are happening and other partners in that as well, and a place where people can connect and bump ideas off of each other, receive support to tinker and experiment. So in 2011, we had a community-based makerspace start that was very similar to the Dream Project. We had, and over those periods of time, the Teen Labs opened at Carnegie Library, really riffing on new media in Chicago to provide spaces in libraries and the exemplars around that. We've had 8 Fab Labs open in secondary settings in the region. 2 of those are with the Carnegie Science Center. 2 of those are actually mobile Fab Labs that go around to communities, to schools. And then just last week, we stole really what was Andrew Coy's term of Rec to Tech, and did a demonstration project in our city our city recreation centers for how you could transform city-operated rec centers into 21st century tech centers for kids. So we pull on partners nationally, we pull on partners locally, we bring those ideas together, and we try to foster the development of that through this network. A couple of quick, what we do as a network and how we've created this community. We think you can do it anywhere. While we all, again in Pittsburgh, are very friendly and we can get around and see each other, we are complicated in that we talk about just in Allegheny County alone, we have 42 different school districts, 42 different school boards, 42 different school unions. I mean, that's a tremendously difficult thing to scale ideas. And so we have some obstacles as well. And so I don't want the idea that Pittsburgh's a nice little small city. I think we have our own challenges, but these are some of the strategies that we've used as a network to really think about the grassroots nature of this, of tinkering and helping really not have a top-down approach, but very much a grassroots approach of catalyzing good ideas and partnerships has been, I think, what the essence of what's happened in Pittsburgh, and what we is very much a maker mindset as well of how you create something. And it has grown to what we can document now as 122 maker spaces in the region, probably 28 different professional development providers of Maker. And so those are some of the ways that we coordinate and organize that work. So I'll leave it there because I think there's a lot of others that want to talk, but I think these are some of those thoughts about how do you do this. You work from where you are, you work with the strengths and the partnerships that you have in a community. You allow people to try new things. You work with lead partners, and critically that you're breaking through silos and boundaries of institutions and fields of practice were really the hallmarks of what Remake Learning has been able to support in our region.
Is anybody else's brain at like max capacity right now after the keynotes all the way up to where we are? That's how I feel right now. My name is Glen Robbins. I'm a principal and soon to be superintendent of another school in a month. I know, condolences to me. But with that being said, Northfield is a small community just outside of Atlantic City. And 4 years ago, when I took that job, it was a job that I've always wanted. And little did I know that the economy was going to start to crumble. And if you've been following along with Atlantic City, it is not the greatest place to be right now. So we've lost over 500 kids in over 4 years. We have 2.5 square miles of a town, and we have 250 foreclosed homes. So, and you wouldn't notice that from looking at the kids that we have, because they come with a lot of pride every single day. But something we tried to do as we changed throughout the years was being that servant leader. And we talked about the exemplars. Everybody here is amazing. I could talk for them for hours. But I really would like to say that I'm only an exemplar because of my kids and my staff. They are the true exemplars. I'm along for the ride as a facilitator. They say I come up with wacky ideas, like when I'm, cutting a surfboard bar out for the hallway. One of the biggest things, that's my IT director right there, Lang, who's simply amazing. But basically, we started talking about what is school, and growing up in a very rural town, it wasn't the greatest education for me, and it was always the cookie cutter. It was always the same thing over and over. And I started looking at these kids more and more and having these conversations with our teachers saying, what are we doing? We're doing the same thing over and over again. So we decided to ask ourselves, what is the experience we're trying to create? From there, we can go about building our curriculum, building our maker, and so forth. We already had pockets of greatness, but it was about exposing others and getting others involved instead of just, one class it's great and the other class it's not. And I was really hoping that my one teacher would be here, Kevin Jerry. He's probably on the way over from an Uber from our hotel that we're staying at. But we redesigned his maker space. We took apart a computer lab and made it a digital shop. And we also transformed the hallways. So that way, learning anywhere at any time, we called it idea space. And we had studios. We changed the vocabulary. We talked about all these changes we can do. We talked about our vocabulary. We talked about our classrooms. When you think of a classroom, you think of rows, you think of boring, you think of traditional. And we just, like, one of the few directives I gave my staff was, you're going to call them studios from this point on. Instead of hallways, you're going to call them idea streets, where we have, as I go through, we have an 80 by 80 Lego board. Those two girls were inside of an old trophy case. Yeah. I'm fortunate because if this was a high school and they took out like the 1965 state champion football team trophy, I'd have been lined up at the board meeting. But at a middle school, it's a lot easier. So what they did was 6th grade won a grant and they put terrapin turtles in there. So we said, girls, why don't you paint? So they painted, and the kid brought in beach sand, because we were 5 minutes from the beach, and brought in all this habitat to put these terrapin turtles, and that became like a Zen-like area. You can see Frank in the middle down below. We put old computers. We always talk about money and what kind of budget do we have. We really have none. We've been flat for the last 4 to 5 years where I've been. So I asked Lang, get everything out of the IT closet that's been sitting in there, and I'm sure a lot of you have that in your schools. It just sits there and collects dust. Take it out, put it on a table, put a screwdriver next to it. The first kid that could put together the laptop wins a prize. We did that the next day. It was like Goodwill Hunting, It was amazing. We had to go find this kid. And he was a 7th grade kid, and the beauty about it was he was a 7th grade at-risk kid. The next day we did it again, and the following morning it was Goodwill all over again, and we had to go find it. It was a 7th grade Hispanic girl who comes from a really rough family. So, and what we started doing is we put video games out in the hallways for kids to design and challenge each other. Because when you think about what you did in the hallways, all of us, Back in the day, it wasn't very productive. So, so for me and for our staff was, how could we get these kids learning all the time without realizing it actually and having fun? So we empowered them. Of course, we let them use their devices. We let them have conversations with us. But we gave them the freedom and autonomy to be respected. I have a middle school, grades 5 through 8. We have just under 500 kids. One of the other things, like I said, the Lego board, we have an 80 by 80 Lego board. And one of the reasons being, it's in the hallway or our idea street, is how many people have it in a library or a makerspace? And how many kids actually get to see that actual space? Or how many kids actually get to touch the Lego board? So to me, it was like everybody gets affected by out in the hallway. We put stationary bikes out there as well for kids exercising. And then we have on to the left, which is our Egg Camp period. And if you're familiar with Egg Camp, we have an Egg Camp period every single day where our kids pick and tell us what they want to learn. So that is simply remarkable when they were designing video games and apps and cooking and crocheting, and just build it from grabbing any material that you could. One group did recycled art and went around and rummaged every trash can and recycling bin, and they sent it over to a company and won a contest. So we started giving these kids the freedom and autonomy of not just pockets of greatness, but allowing them to go elsewhere. I have a picture up top, and like I said, I was wishing Kevin was here, and I give a big credit to Pam Moran back there, if she's still here. She linked us up with Bon Ku. Bon Ku is a doctor from Thomas Jefferson University. They came to visit us in middle school. And if you know Thomas Jefferson University, they're the guys that stand on the sidelines of Eagles games, Philadelphia Eagles games. They are legit. And they said, we'd like to do a project with you. So we had 8th grade doing prosthetic hands, 3D design. And all this is through design thinking. And that was our manifesto, making kids life ready. Anybody can build something, but what can you do to make something better for someone else's life? So what we did was we teamed up with the pediatric unit, and we had 7th graders designing for pediatric units, kids designing for kids. And throughout the year, it progressed on with iteration after iteration, sort of like a Shark Tank by Skype and Google Hangout with these amazing people from Thomas Jefferson. And then they chose the top 3 winners. And right now, those winners are working with Thomas Jefferson to implement their projects into the pediatric unit, which is simply amazing. So we give the kids a lot of freedom. We do things a lot differently, just like all of you do in here. But our mantra, like I said, is life ready. How can we truly make a difference for all these kids? So I'm gonna end there. I could talk forever. So this guy's awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, Glenn. I've got to balance my phone. I'm taking pictures of your Lego board and everything.
I have a blog post. You can read how to design it.
So I'm Akili Lee. I'm a co-founder of the Digital Youth Network in Chicago, based out of DePaul University. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we do and really want to focus on transitioning really quickly to kind of a challenge that we're trying to really start to address right now. So maybe the discussion can selfishly help us as well. So one, we start a lot of our work with the understanding that the school and the classroom cannot be the sole provider of the educational experience for our young people. And so while we know obviously room full of teachers, you guys are critical. Everything, the buildings that you're in are critical to that development of our young people, but there are communities of educators outside of the classroom, their parents, there are adults in those kids' lives, their peers that are really critical to kids being able to develop across the board. And so how do we develop systems that can support that? And so a quick rundown of our background. Our first 5 years really was spent deeply partnering within a school, but we focused initially on providing after-school programming, a broad array of digital media, production-oriented workshops, so anything from graphic design. We had a full music studio in the school, so music production, podcasting, game design, et cetera. You get the gist. But a lot of what we really look to do there is to say, can we build a base set of skills and a base set of literacies around technology and digital tools for those young people, but within a school community and within a school environment where we can then start to partner with the school to really let them help us think around what it really looks like now to build on top of those schools. So that kid who is not really engaged at all might have an IEP, he's not really doing anything, let's say in English class, but he's a prolific writer, and so he's doing all of this music after school. What does that now look like for the English teacher to be able to recognize that and create new opportunities for him to succeed within the classroom? And so a lot of that work for us in terms of creating those opportunities, but also creating bridges between sort of that self-directed and interest-driven work into the more formal spaces within the first 5 years. We transition in then to really look at saying, how do we also look at other spaces where kids are or kids should be? Libraries are an anchor institution in all of our cities, free and open to the public, but at least in Chicago, really waning in terms of how they were able to really actively engage young people. And so we partnered with the Chicago Public Library to create something called U-Media, which right now on downtown Chicago in the biggest branch library, it's a 5,000 square foot space on the ground floor that's only open to teens in Chicago. Any teen in the city can come in and get access to technology, be it camera, laptops, video games. There's also a music studio, but also just as importantly, access to engaged peers, but also mentors. So we have teaching artists who are in the space who we also would train and support, through professional development that would run workshops, but also really support the young people in connecting their interests to the equipment and access and workshops that may align with that for them. So really spend a good amount of time partnering, saying how do we now also look at spaces and institutions and really design those in different ways to be able to bring more out of our young people, and start to quickly then transition now into a big core of our work has been looking at what we call a project called the Chicago City of Learning. And so what that is, in short, we try to expose as much of the out-of-school learning opportunities that exist within a city in one place. In Chicago, there's never been one place you can go to try to find a summer program, an after-school program, et cetera, for your young person. You had to know to go to the Museum of Science and Industry website. You had to know to go to the website, if they have one, of this small CBO who does a robotics program. So we engage and develop and help build a community of those providers, where we've had over the last 3 years, 160 plus providers provide us with a program database of over 30,000 programs. So kids can say, I want to find a robotics program on the south side of Chicago, and look for that in one place. 2, when there are not those opportunities that are accessible to them, there's a set and a catalog of self-paced online activities as well. So if you cannot learn to code in your community, there's a set of playlists and challenges that you can engage through the website, at home, in the library, et cetera. And then 3, now that we can help expose those opportunities to kids, can those kids leave all of these really rich programs and actually have a record of what they have done? I went to this robotics program and I've developed these really specific and important and critical skills and knowledge bases and dispositions, but we often in our types of programs let our young people leave out of the door without supporting them and being able to articulate what they've learned and then use it as a bridge to a new experience. And so they have a digital portfolio that all of these providers are able to be able to contribute to, and through the form of digital badges to talk about the skills developed in those programs. We also work deeply with the school district, as an example, to be able to also create within the school walls spaces for kids to be able to be recognized and rewarded for that. As an example, this year we piloted a program where high school age young people participating are able to earn high school credit for service learning by engaging in out of school projects. And so this really leads us to our next challenge. So now that we really looked at the city and said, how can we look at the ecosystem of offerings, what does it really look like when we do it in a much more concentrated way? When we partner and engage with out-of-school providers in a neighborhood or a small set of connected neighborhoods in one community, when we partner deeply with the schools in one community, how do we create an environment where kids and parents have easy access to understand what's available to them? There are pathways that are open to being open to them because they are able to have these records that say, I know this, I do this, I'm good at this. And so in this one community, and I'll be very quick, there are 2,100 kids in the middle school age, so 6th to 8th graders right now in that community. Because we've done this citywide project, we also have data around what people are looking for in Chicago. When parents go to the project to say, this is what I want to look for my student, when students go to the website and try to find something to do, they actually are looking for things that are just like all of the activities everybody's talking about today. But the data that we have is showing that, the majority of what's available to them is around sports and wellness and other areas. And it's a very small amount that focus on things like coding and games or even design. And so how do we really look at saying, if we did a much more concentrated effort to partner with the people who create and provide these experiences to young people already, and then we say we can partner deeply or ourselves provide new experiences that can fit in some of those gaps for areas that do not exist, but then partner very deeply with the set of schools and that community to really say, how can we bring those experiences and those skills that those young people are having outside of school walls and be able to create pathways for them to be able to better succeed in the school day and outside.
Is there a link to this? I think that's it. You can turn the slide off or put it to the main slide. Thanks. So thank you again. They have been doing amazing work building communities of makers and maker education, whether it's in a school or a district or a city. The first question I have is that I know there's a lot of maker educators out here, and I know a lot of them are probably individual in their school, or there might be one or two, or there might be a principal in them, who want to expand that community and nurture that community and grow that community in such a way that it includes everybody and that it becomes strong. So my question to all of you, you can answer in any order you wish, is what one or two strategies you think work to build, like what worked for your community? So I mean, you all have quite large communities, frankly, of makers, whether they're maker students or maker educators or institutions. What one or two strategies worked for your community to build that, to nurture and to grow that community?
So I would say there were a couple things that were just kind of aha moments for us when we first started delving into this. And for some of our teachers, they embraced it right away. Others they had a difficult time with it. And I think when we changed our messaging a little bit to say, like, because our art teacher, our tech ed teacher, they would say, well, what I'm doing isn't making. I'm like, no, what you are doing is making. So making falls under multiple categories, multiple definitions, and trying to package it in one certain way, it kind of works counter against what you want to do in terms of embedding it within the culture. We encourage people to take risks and try things that were a little different, and use time differently, use space differently. And again, for some folks that was a bit of a leap. For other folks, that it was embraced. And I think finding ways, I'd mentioned the earlier slide I showed with our parents, bringing our parents in early and having them involved with our PTA, our support groups, our parent network into middle school level, bringing them in and giving them a sense of how they can be involved and how the things they were doing as they grew up were now kind of cool again. And they could share those with the kids in the school and be a part of it, and not just come in for the book fair or to come in and be the milk mom at lunchtime. There's other things that you can do that really add value to the school. And I think even with our high school, which is sometimes have high school teachers that are so content oriented, getting them to let go of the content and think about the dispositions that they really want out of their students. We did an easy little activity. It was kind of cool at one of our open houses, and we had a moderator, one of our principals, started asking questions of our parents and said, describe your kids. What do you want them to be like when they leave school? And so they started throwing up all these different descriptive terms. I want them to be a good citizen. I want them to be empathetic. I want them to be a caring person. I want them to be creative. And so we had this really great list that we were putting up in real time on the board. And we said, wow, look up there. There's content really isn't there anywhere. And just the realization that kids forget content the way it's been traditionally taught. And if you really want kids to hold on to things that are strong and within their sense, then you've got to do them in a way that's hands-on and that you give them agency. We had this great experience last year with a physics class in our high school. Traditionally, it's that class is full of kids who don't move on to college. And we got engaged with Calgon Corporation, and our students were engaged in a project where they were posed the question of, how do you take granulated activated carbon and use it to eliminate odors within the kitchen? And then the students were experimenting with granulated activated carbon, doing all kinds of crazy things, even asking the superintendent to wash his hands with this special soap that they made. It turned my hands blue. But what was kind of funny about the whole thing was when they took their prototypes and they presented them to the folks at Calgon, and I was in the room when they were doing these presentations, and it was, the kids were stressed. They really were stressed, but they did a phenomenal job. And in the middle of the presentation, one of the scientists from Calgon got up and left the room. I noticed him leaving. He came back a few minutes later, and he brought in a prototype, and he said, "I want to show you my prototype because it's almost exactly like your prototype." The prototype they had used and developed in their laboratory was identical to the one that our students had made. And I could just see the kids beaming with confidence and, thinking now, boy, the world has kind of opened up to me. I can do anything I want to do. I can go to college if I want to do that, or I can follow a different path if it fits me best.
In Staten Island, one of the challenges that we were facing in trying to make this a district-wide effort, being Staten Island Tech, being a STEM magnet for students and the borough, we partnered with a community-based organization who, over the course of the year through the Summer Youth Employment Program, so in New York City, SYEP is a large fund that helps employ youth during the summer up to the age of 24. And what we had done is partnered with the community-based organization that had SYEP a contract for the summer, and we brought elementary and middle school students into the high school via a STEAM summer camp that we promoted throughout the year when we had elementary and middle schools come to visit us by the parts of the island in which they were grouped by. We were promoting the STEAM summer camp, and over the course of the summer, students were engaged by other students. And of course, the funding really helped facilitate paying the teachers, buying the equipment, and making for a really rich experience for the students, from doing TV studio production, music production, 3D printing, computer programming, and Lego robotics. And no surprise, one of the key things that really helped make this come together, and just as a piece of advice, if trying to do this and replicate this, I've always come to find a lot of the schools involved in the FIRST Robotics, whether it be the FRC, the Tech Challenge, the Lego Robotics, there's makers all over the place, and a lot of them find their roots and that's why they call it FIRST. FIRST, I think, was always meant to be a gateway program to bringing STEM to an education environment. So having great success with that, it really helped us in creating a template for creating a pipeline that we could replicate and hopefully continue to find other sources of funding and income to perpetuate this in other school districts.
Actually, it just made me think of, Akili, you're building a network at, as I understand it, in the Washington Park area. What is your strategy to do so? I mean, how do you plan on, how are you doing it?
Yeah, so I think the starting point for something like that is approaching it by recognizing it's not about us bringing something new, right? That there's a network and an ecosystem of folk that already care, that are already engaged, but oftentimes maybe don't necessarily have the time or mechanisms to be connected to really be able to leverage the power of that network. And so we try to convene providers, but also try to convene educators. And so the providers, we'll typically, at the citywide level, we'll work with, we'll go through a series of trainings. In the sense, it was big, about 4 months, right, around connected learning principles, et cetera. And that would lead to how they might approach about badging their kids for their programs. I think when we look at really in a much more hyper-local, in a neighborhood strategy, it's around saying, one, these providers all work in the same school, right up the block from each other. How do they come together to really articulate for themselves, with the teachers, what new opportunities and what new pathways can exist if you have all of the STEM providers who work with the same kids and the same parents all in the same area. Two, I think building on what everybody else is saying, make it all transparent as possible, right? There's always often a lot of value already happening in these programs in these communities, but we need to take the steps to be able to make what the kids are creating possible, give space for the educators to be able to share out what their own best practices are with their peers, and then that will also start to feed all on itself, create new opportunities, create much more buy-in.
Thanks. Sorry, Glenn, I didn't. Oh, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Wow, that was a fast 30 seconds. So you know what? I'm going to actually have 2 questions I'm going to ask you to answer, but all of you answer in 1 sentence each, okay? So the first question is, what surprised you most in the last number of years that you've been doing this? And 2 is, so think of one sentence, like, and the second question, if I could remember it, would be, what is the one step that somebody can do tomorrow to start building their network? Just one simple, one thing that they can take home. So I'm just going to start with whoever, indicates first they have a sentence in their head. Which means it has to be quick, because I have 30 seconds.
I think the one step would just be to call up somebody you met today, or call up someone you saw on stage if you're here in New York, and try to go and see what they're doing.
Great, thanks.
One step would be focus on yourself, focus on your school. A lot of times we focus on what other schools are doing, and a lot of administrators just buy to buy. They have 3D printers, we need 3D printers. They have laser cutters, we need laser cutters. So you need to focus on who your kids are, who your staff are, and who you are.
Mine would be, think about the self-imposed obstacles that you have. And we all know about the obstacles that come from state departments of education and those types of things, standardized testing, all that. But think about the things that we put in place ourselves that impede us being creative and how we use space and time, and just the flexibility that we give others to take risks.
I'd very quickly build on that and say, don't ask permission.
One of my many lives, I was in the Army, and the thing I learned in the Army was, don't ask permission. Forgiveness is easier.
My one step would be to do a talent inventory in your schools of your faculty and your students. You'd be surprised, thrown in the surprise.
There we go.
You'd be surprised who you have and what talents exist in your very own building.
She's ending me, so I want to thank the panelists very much. It was really great. Thanks.